I want to give my astrology introduction, and that is I am a Cancer rising, Leo sun, and Gemini moon. And so I want to pause because I would love if you could all pop in the chat your big three, if you know it, or at least your zodiac sign, your sun sign. I would just love to see who we have in here today. Okay, we've got a little Libra. I'm looking for my Earths. Oh, I mean, yes. Okay, we've got Pisces sun. Oh, Pisces. Gemini rising. Okay, Capricorn rising. Oh, Pisces moon's one of my favorite. We could do a whole session about having a Pisces moon. Oh, sweet. Oh gosh, and you guys forgive me here. I just lost my, there we go. Okay. All right. So thank you everyone for dropping it in. I was just so curious. And truly, again, I'm excited for today because making astrology practical and accessible is my passion. I want people to connect astrology and utilize it really in their everyday lives. I'm an astrologer that you could find at a crystal shop or a spiritual event, but my branding, my positioning, you'll find me at your favorite coffee shop or at your favorite clothing boutique. Because again, that's where I want to meet people. I want them to see that astrology can be something that we just have. It's part of us. And for goodness sakes, up until the 1500s-ish, astronomers and astrologers sat together. They collaborated, they worked together. It wasn't something that was separate and scary and woo-woo and we should be burned at the stake for. So all that being said, because of that, for today, I'm going to walk you through a breakdown of the birth chart because learning about my birth chart cracked me open in ways that I didn't know was possible. So much so that I left my corporate job, my cookie cutter life, studied astrology, and now I'm here sharing it. My goal is to help you understand your chart in a way that gives you real tools so that when you hear us astrologers yapping about the forecast, the astrological happenings in the sky, that you really can take that information and figure out how does this apply to you and your lived experience. And listen, again, astrology is a lot. It is the study of a lifetime, perhaps many lifetimes. And so I want you to take it easy today. There's going to be some things you're like, why didn't she talk about this? Or why did she choose to talk about this? And I will explain all of that. So I felt like I had to start with this. And again, I'm sure we all know, what is astrology, but I thought this might help again, as we move into the birth chart, just help with some context. Astrology is literally the study of the stars, right? And humanity has done this since the beginning of time. And every culture, humans have always looked to the sky to understand the patterns taking place up in the celestial landscape to help make sense of what's happening down here on Earth. They have done this since the beginning of time, right? They've done this to understand collectively, is there going to be feast? Is there going to be famine? And they've also done it to understand what's happening in the life of, right, an individual, you and me. And so, again, what I want you to know is astrology is not a language, and we don't all speak it in the same way. And maybe it's because I'm also on that side of TikTok where I feel like some of us astrologers were sparring with each other, right, over whose astrology is more correct. And I'm here to say, from my perspective, there is no one astrology that is better than the other. And I just want to drive that home. I was born in Seattle, Washington, in the West. I learned astrology through the tropical zodiac, the Western perspective. But there's other systems, right? Vedic, which is Jyotish, right? It uses the sidereal zodiac. And again, no one better than the other. Because even within Western astrology, there are different types and functions and house systems. I use the whole sign house system. Others use Placidus. Both are valid. And listen, I have a Gemini moon. That's my chart ruler. It's in the 12th house for those of you who might know what that means. And so I might use Placidus down the road. I flirt with it in my personal chart, but I don't know. I'm not sure where I will go with astrology and my learnings and how I share it. So really, truly, The intention of astrology, especially with the birth chart, is to help really, help you understand who you are. And, so yes, so I think that is so important. I also just want you to know that every astrologer brings their own personal lens, their own lived experience. And when you are reading your own birth chart, you're going to do the same. And I think that matters. So please keep that in mind. And also, I ask that you just be open-minded today. If you've learned astrology a little differently, that's okay. I just ask that you be open to how I share it, to feel into it, and how does it land for you? And really take this alongside and combine it, make it your own. So, like I said, my studies are heavily rooted in the traditional Hellenistic astrology. However, I do weave in some modern psychological elements. I work with the outer planets when they come into and they connect with the angles or the inner planets. Not every astrologer, and not every Hellenistic astrologer does that. I might get yelled at by some, in fact, but I do. I find those insights to be incredibly valid for my clients. So again, astrology is vast. There's so much complexity and nuance that, again, there's a lot I'm not going to cover. There's history, there's context, there's the depth matters, and we're not going to get into all of it. And I would not even want to put you through that, right? So again, what I want you to walk away with today is the bones, the basics of the birth chart. So, okay, so enough of that. Let's pull her up. This is, this chart here, this birth chart I pulled from astro.com because this is how I learned astrology. I learned it through astro.com. It's free. There's plenty of resources within astro.com, but there's a ton of other great softwares too that you can use. But I just thought I would use that because it's still near and dear to me. I use Luna now, but I still come back and I have my moments. But okay, so if I'm assuming most of you have probably seen the birth chart in this, right, in some capacity. If those of you, maybe there's some of you who've just seen it, right, just seen your planets and your houses sort of written out. This is a lot. And even if you've seen it before, it's a lot. So what I want you to know is when you're looking at the birth chart, it's right, it's like, wow, what is all this? But this is truly a snapshot of the exact moment that you were born, the day, location, the exact time, from the Western astrology perspective, the system that we use, right? This is where the planets were moving in the sky, the moment that you took your very first breath. I'm going to use a lot of analogies today, and here's the first one. And for some of you who've learned, your teachers might have used this one too, but I really want you to look at this birth chart and think of it as your life movie. This is the movie of your life. This is what it is. It's telling me about you, some of the things that were fated, some of the things you're going to be working through, things that come with gift and ease, things that are natural, and things that have hardship, challenge, delay. We can see all of that based on your planets, the zodiac signs they're in, the houses, who they're talking to, the aspects, the connections that they're making. So that, really quickly, is your birth chart. But there's more. We're going to peel back some layers here. And we're going to do that starting with the planets. Now, if you see these little black symbols in like the light blue part of the birth chart here, these are primarily your planets. There's some fixed stars, some other little celestial being bodies. But just think of these. This is where your planets are. And going back to the movie analogy, these planets are the characters in your life movie. Each one expresses itself very differently. So the character of the planet, the sun, for example, the sun likes to shine big and bright. The sun is the main character. The sun speaks to our personality, self-expression, the person that we are learning to become. Ego, the hero, the main character, that is the sun. Mercury, on the other hand, Mercury, for example, Mercury communicates, it connects, it's the messenger. Mercury thinks and processes, it soaks up information. So every planet, every character has its own energy, its own way of showing up and doing its thing. And this is all of you, but we're taking you apart sort of piece by piece, planet by planet, to speak to you in a more granular level. So those are your characters. Those are the planets. This is your big life movie. And now we are going to invite in the zodiac signs. And these are the costumes that your planets, your characters wear in your life movie. And so it's important, like here, if you see in this, like, if you look at the birth chart and think of it like a pizza, and you think, oh, there's like 12 slices of pizza. If you look at what might be this pizza crust here in the hot pink kind of part of the chart there, those are your zodiac signs. Again, you'll see 12 of them. The sign, and this is, again, like this, we've got some planets down here. We've got the sun and Venus and Mercury down here in Leo. These characters in Leo. And so this helps, right? This helps me understand a little bit more about this person, their ego, their personality. Leo's a fire sign. It is here to shine big and bright. They need to embrace their authenticity, their truth. They need to be seen. They need to lead when they feel called, and truly when they can do so with integrity. Leo's here to welcome people, to really exude like warmth, generosity. They need to connect with their creativity. They need to bring things to life. And last but not least, they need to find their joy. They need to have fun. Leos need to celebrate. So that is, again, that is your character, the sun, that planet that radiates, shines big and bright. That is how it expresses itself when it is in the sign of Leo. But so that's important. And I included all of the 12 zodiac signs and gave super tiny little blurbs. It feels wrong to talk about the signs in such little terms of who they are. But for today, and again, for it being so much information, that's how I was like, we're not going to get into the weeds with the planets and the zodiac signs. But again, this is all important because when we're looking at this chart over here, we're trying to understand, right? Who are our planets? What are, who are they? How do they like to express themselves? Moving over, the third thing that we're going to unpack here in this birth chart is the houses. And this is the thing that is really hard to talk about in pop astrology, because again, with astrology, there's so much. It's like, how can we mention all of these things, right? And everything is so personal. But the houses are so important. If we go again back to the idea of the pizza and there being 12 slices of pizza, if you look at the very center of the chart, you see that hot pink circle again in the middle, and you'll see 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12. 12 slices of pizza, 12 slices of pizza, 12 houses, 12 areas of life. And going back to the idea of the movie, the life movie, you can think of the houses as like the sets or the backdrops. This is where the planets, the characters in their zodiac signs, the costumes, are playing things out. So this is important, right? Because it's going to help us understand, right? If we have a lot of characters in one zodiac sign in one house, there's going to be some action there. And so, for example, if we talk about home, right? Home in the individual's chart here. Is this a home that we find in the luxury of the Hollywood Hills? Or is this a home that we're going to find in like impoverished Appalachian Mountains? And forgive me, but I'm just trying to show you the big difference, right? And so understanding the houses, that helps us understand where, parts of our life are going to be more activated. What more, parts of life are going to be explored within this life movie. Now, I chose to put the rising sign here and I debated, but the rising sign, and I'm sure many of you have heard the rising sign, and if you know yours, great. But the rising sign sets up the houses. The rising sign sets up the birth chart, because the rising sign, which is this AC that we have here in the chart, capital A, capital C, it's circled with the hot pink circle. Because it's also, again, it's known as the ascendant, and that's how it is here in astro.com. The rising sign is the point of self and identity. And it marks where the sun was rising on the eastern horizon at your exact moment of birth. Because of that, it always falls in the first house. So if you think of this wheel, this circle, it's sort of always moving. And when you're born, it stops. That marker, that point starts the first house. And then all of the remaining 11 houses fall into place from there. So again, when you're born, that's the rising sign sets up all of the houses. And together, they map out the full arc of the human life experience. And so we'll talk about the rising sign more, but if you don't have your rising sign because you don't have your exact time of birth, that's very tough and tricky, because that helps us understand, again, more about you, where things are taking place, like where the big action's happening in your life movie. There are astrologers who do birth time rectification. I'm not one of those. I don't feel like I can do it in integrity, but that can certainly be an avenue if you are not able to find your exact time of birth. What I would say is there is still plenty to chat about without having it. But certainly we can get more into the weeds and really be able to speak about you more in detail when we have the houses. So the houses, let me flip over here because, it was hard to include all of that information, but I wanted you to see sort of where they were. But these are the 12 houses, and I don't want to necessarily bore you with going through each of them in depth, because I said I wasn't going to do that with the planets and I wasn't going to do that with the zodiac signs. But because these are not kind of as commonly known, I just want you to see here again how they layer. The first house, this is the I am. This is me, self-identity, physical appearance. This is just my natural innate energy that I use to navigate the world. This is me without the ego. So again, first house, so important. Rising sign here. But okay, so here you are. You have arrived. This is you. But what do you have? Are you hungry? You need to eat. You need shelter. So this is where we talk about with the second house resources, the inner and outer resources, the things that bring us comfort and ground us. And then it really builds from here, because the third house, we've got community and siblings, early learning, our day-to-day environment that provides us with knowledge and information. The fourth, this is family, this is home, literally, figuratively, this is our roots, our traditions, where we're from, our ancestors. We get to the seventh house, and again, I'm kind of skipping, but we get to the seventh. This is where we talk about our one-to-one personal relationships. These are our people, our others, the we. The first house is me, right across from it is the we. So then we get to the ninth, we talk about our beliefs and the wisdom that we are really wanting to learn and getting outside of our comfort zone so that we can figure out, do we still believe what we believe when our beliefs are challenged, when our convictions are, being questioned, do we pivot? Do we learn something new? This is, the ninth is also where we share. But so anyways, then we get to the 11th, and that's where we're like, okay, my gosh, this is where the hopes and the dreams and the aspirations and the groups of people that you have met and connected with along your way. This is the 11th house. And so with that to say, each one of them layers on top of the last to complete really like the full life experience. And that's the beauty of this system. Astrology leaves nothing out. I have to say this, especially to, my my Virgos perhaps. And I feel like I pick on Virgos, and I will not today. But please do not worry if you do not have planets in every single house. You carry every area of life within you. You carry every zodiac sign. But when there is a cluster of planets, especially inner planets, in a particular house, zodiac sign, that is a signal. This is an area of life that's activated. So it's just a focus. And there is more there that I will not get into, but there is plenty of other reasons why other areas of life might be big, even if you don't have your planets there. And maybe we can get into that at the end. But anyways, the house is so important. Now, okay. So we've got the movie, we've got the life movie, we've got the, we've got the we've got the characters, we've got the costumes that these characters wear, we have the sets and the backdrops. But to really understand the movie, your life movie, we need to understand the plot. And so this is an astrology where we look at the aspects, and these are those red and blue lines that you see here in the inner part of the wheel inside that hot pink circle. This is how the planets are connecting to each other. But I suppose before we go further, there is something important to understand here. There are 360 degrees in your birth chart. In traditional Hellenistic astrology, every zodiac sign, every house contains an equal number of degrees, 30 degrees, 0 through 29. This matters when we talk about aspects, because this is the way that we measure aspects. It's based on the number of degrees between planets. And that distance between the planets tells us what kind of aspect, what kind of relationship has been formed. The red lines here, they represent patterns, energy patterns that come with challenge, perhaps some tension, hardship, or delay. These are where our big lessons live. And listen, I feel like I have so many, of my clients be like, oh, I have all these, hard things. And no, we need the tension in life. If everything was fed to us with a silver spoon, how would we learn? How would we grow? How would we evolve, right? The tension within us forces growth. So please know it's not doom and gloom there. The blue lines here are where we find some ease and gift, where we've got natural talent, some abundance, and the energy just really flows. So again, not to pick on my Virgos, but for anybody who's like, wait, hold on. I really don't want you to count up your red lines and your blue lines and deciding again, like, oh my God, life is over. Please don't do that. Some of these aspects are significant and some really aren't. And that's why you work with an astrologer, why you use your app, why you connect, with Lora on Discord or, whatever, however, that's why you keep learning. So I did include like the major main aspects, and I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to keep them there for any of you who are intermediate, because the goal of today is not that. It just isn't. That's too in the weeds. But I just wanted you guys to know that is what we're looking at, right? We are looking at the plot here. Who's getting along with who? Where's the drama? Where's the beef? Like, what is happening here? Where's the ease? Where do we see some really fortunate, good things? And that's here with the plot, the aspects, your life movie. So that was quick, right? Quick. And here's the thing. It's because I really want you to have some takeaways. Right? I don't want to just like dive in. I want you to be like, okay. And especially for you guys who maybe haven't, studied all of the astrology things. So again, there's so much more we could talk about. We're not going to. But for the key takeaways, I really want you to learn what your big three are, really understand all of the nuance of who they are. I want you to, really understand and read your horoscope. Whenever us astrologers are talking, I want you to read it for your rising sign, and not that you can't with the sun, but maybe because I'm a traditional astrologer, the rising sign, it just gives so much. So we'll get into that. And then I want you to know who your chart ruler is. If the life is the movie, right? We've got this big life movie. Your chart ruler, your birth chart ruler is the director of your life movie. And that's important, right? The director's the big, guy or gal. Or so, so excuse me. But those are the big takeaways. So I want to kick it off here. Excuse me. We're going to kick it off with your big three. Okay. And listen, the big three are important, and you know who you are, right? This information should feel validating. It should help you understand more parts of yourself. I have a Gemini moon in the 12th house. Sometimes there's parts of me that I don't fully understand. And so having, understanding more about my big three was just helpful, because it really resonated. And I hope that they do for you too. And truly, again, if we had to choose three things, right? If we had to choose three things in the chart for you to know through and through, that's going to be your big three. So, and of course, this is not all of you. This is part of you, but all important. And so I'm going to start with the rising sign, and I've touched on it. I'm going to touch on it again. The rising sign, this is the point of self and identity. This is the energy that you entered the world with. From our perspective, or from my perspective, this is the energy that you chose to come into human life with. This is you. And so this is your energy. This is you, again, without your ego. And so, this is how you are perceived. This is how people see you, like physically, energetically. And so the rising sign is important. And really anything that touches the rising sign, any planet it has communication with, this is important, because it helps us understand, more about our self-worth, where we might see some of those insecurities. I can't get over rising sign is so important. Maybe just fun fact. In traditional astrology, the rising sign was always your horoscope. And it wasn't until the integration of modern astrology and Freud and, and sun sign astrology that shifted. And let me be clear to my modern astrologers, listen, sun sign astrology made astrology more accessible. If you came from a family of power or privilege, you might have had your exact birth time. If you didn't, and, you might have been born on a farm in the dawn of whatever, right? Not everybody had that exact time of birth. And so certainly in the US and most states, you get your exact time of birth on your birth certificate. So, or maybe a caretaker parent wrote it down in a baby book. So anyways, yeah. So anyways, for Eons and Eons, we've always looked at the rising sign, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. There's still plenty you get from the sun sign when you look at it for that. So, but rising sign, so important. And onto the sun. And gosh, you guys, I feel like I really kind of poo-poo on the sun, and I shouldn't. Listen, I'm a Leo sun. The sun loves to be in Leo. It's at home. And I'm very Leo. I have the sun, I've got Mercury, I've got Venus, the way, I think, and, what I value, and my ego, all in Leo. But I'm a Cancer rising. So anyways, I share that because it really helped me. I had a lot of people who were like, God, you really remind me more of Cancer. And, folks would say, oh, you're right on the cusp. And, in traditional astrology, we don't necessarily use cusps like that. But I was like, well, it makes sense, because, yeah, I'm a Cancer rising. And that's what a lot of people pick up on. So, okay, but the sun is important. The sun radiates. The sun it represents your external world. This is your core personality, how you self-express, how you shine in the tribe. This is ego. And listen, from my perspective, we chose Earth. We get an ego. And so, yeah, let's leave the things that aren't great for the ego. But also, this is the energy that, let's embrace the ego, right? Let's hug in it and, love on it a little bit. And from my perspective with the sun, unless there's a lot of other things going on, this is really the energy that you are learning to grow into and become. So the sun's important. And now, the moon. Oh, you guys, the moon sign. The moon. I love the moon so much. We could talk about the moon all day. The moon is important because the moon is the inner world. The sun is the outer, the moon is the inner world. It's the emotional world. It's the part of you that you hold near and dear. It's the part that feels vulnerable, that needs security and stability. We do not want our moon rocked. We want her held and nurtured. The moon is emotions, it is feelings, instinct, it is mother, the feminine, the divine. It is water, it is forest. There, right? The moon is holding memory, it's picking up things. It's important that we pay attention to what the inner world is telling us. The moon is also the physical body in the chart. I realized with the rising sign, here's where we talk about physical appearance, but the actual body, that is the moon. That's because the planets move, right? The rising sign does not. That's just a marker. It's a point. So the moon is so important. So that is the moon. And now, and actually, maybe I'll say this, listen, if I might write, actually, I'm going to wait on that one. I was going to give another analogy example, but we'll hold here because we're getting into my second key takeaway that I want you guys to have. And it's because it's one of the most practical things that you can do with your astrology. And it's knowing your rising sign. And because again, right, the rising sign sets up the houses. And here's why that matters. And I'll use this upcoming full moon in Sagittarius as an example. The full moons are times to reflect, we review, and then we release, right? Like things have gotten too full, something's got to go. And because this is a Sagittarius full moon, perhaps we'll be talking about beliefs and passion, adventure, the big learnings, right? Like what are those things? And, and the full moon is activating that. But Sagittarius rules a specific area of life for each of us. And because of your rising sign, we now know what that is. So for my Cancer risings, perhaps, all my Cancer risings you're looking out because I'm a Cancer rising. But listen, Sagittarius rules your 6th house. That is the area of life where we talk about health and wellness, your daily output, like how you optimize your output, the grind, the work, the day-to-day output. And so this full moon then becomes this really personal invitation. Like what kind of habits or patterns do you need perhaps to release to better optimize your health, how you show up for work, how you're able to do like the daily grind. So you only get that information when you read your horoscope for your rising sign. And so please read it for your sun sign too. But this helps you really utilize your chart, your birth chart, and show up and work with the astrology intentionally, practically. And so it's so important. And again, I've got so much Leo. I've got I really only look at it for Cancer. Because again, I get that real good information. So we're going to read our horoscope for our rising sign if we don't already. And the third takeaway, this is a bit of a stretch, okay? And I realize that, and again, if you're a seasoned astrologer here, this is perhaps not. But I want you to get to know your chart ruler. And I spoke about this quickly. This chart ruler is the director of your life movie. So every zodiac sign has a bestie planet. In traditional astrology, we call this a planetary ruler, right, of the zodiac sign. But I like bestie planet, right? It is like, hi, I'm Aries, and I've got my buddy Mars. And so anyway, so that's what I like to say, the bestie planet. right? This planet, so every zodiac sign has this planet that is going out there in the world and doing things on its behalf. And since every house has a zodiac sign on its cusp, that means there is a planet out there supporting, helping, hindering, hurting, whatever is taking place in that area of life. So every zodiac sign, every area of your life has, right, a bestie planet. But the one that I want you to walk away with today is the ruler of your rising sign, the chart ruler. Because again, going back to the, right, this is your director. This is the planet that's calling the shots. The director knows every character, every plot twist, every nuance, all the complexity. The director understands the story intimately, and they're here to help you sort of navigate through the highs and lows and everything in between. The reason why I'm like, oh, I kind of pause with the help is because, listen, every director is different. Is your director super punctual, on time? Do they really have the vision? Is your director like a bit of a drunk? Does it need lots of rest, or it goes crazy? Like, do they go crazy, right? Like, it's important to understand who your, who that director of your life is, that chart ruler. And so here's where I wanted to use this example that I was about to share with you guys. And I've sort of alluded to the 12th and blah, 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 me being a, 12th house moon Gemini person. I'm Cancer rising, right? So my bestie planet is the moon. My moon is in Gemini, which means I am innately curious, inquisitive. I'm super adaptable. I love to learn. That's probably why I study astrology. Like, knowledge is insatiable for me. I want to know all the things. And then I'm a Leo too. So I'm like, I want to know all about me. And I'm Cancer rising, so I want to know all about you. Okay. But that Gemini moon of mine is in the 12th house. So my directing planet is in the 12th house. And the 12th house is honestly the trickiest one to talk about. And I'm a 12th houser, and I still don't love to talk about it because it's hard to understand. Houses 1 through 11 really speak to the earth experience, but the 12th house doesn't. It's like 1 through 11. It's like, this is life. And then the 12th is this liminal space between life, death, and rebirth. And so in the 12th, we talk about the subconscious, the unconscious mind. This is where we can run into issues with mental health. This is where we can self-sabotage, self-undo. This is where we can get trapped. This is where we can get lost. But the beauty of the 12th, this is also when we're able to tap in and listen to our intuition. This is where, and there's a spiritual component from my perspective. Again, a Hellenistic astrologer would probably disagree, but this is where spiritual integration and practice and ritual is important, because this is also the area of life where we can get found. I love to talk about the 12th clearly. Okay, even though I don't like to talk about it because it's hard. So I say that because my director is operating in a place where it can be hard to recognize its patterns, where it is hard to connect with its feelings because it's intellectualizing them, it's learning, it's not necessarily processing them. It's hard to take action with my director being in the 12th in Gemini. I have to actively work through things differently to get the kind of things that I really desire. I have to really protect and clear my energy and make sure that I've got really strong boundaries, because if not, I can get easily overwhelmed. I then also am going to need more rest and retreat and solitude. So let's compare that to if you're a Cancer rising, but you have your moon, your chart ruler, the director of your life movie, in Capricorn. And that would make that Capricorn. This would be the 7th house. That moon has structure. It is linear, process oriented. It is protective. It has walls up. With the Capricorn moon, sometimes I like to compare it to like Fort Knox. The moon is in Fort Knox. Like, does not want to take those walls down. So this moon is different, right? And in the 7th house, then this moon is really going to look to the most important people in its life to make sense of the world. It's going to thrive in great partnership, right? And it's going to get really great information. Or if it's in tough partnership, it's going to struggle. And so our people, our most important one-to-one relationships are super, super important when we have our chart ruling planet, the moon, in the 7th house. So again, same rising sign. Gosh, they could be a Leo sun too, but having that directing planet, that director of your life movie, that chart ruler planet, that's a very different director. So I have a special one. I think we're okay on time because it's 4:15. There is one other that I thought we could just chat about. And it's, again, this one's also a little bit of a stretch, but I wanted to invite something for all of you. And hopefully this is something that is kind of a nice thing to know, maybe perhaps. I wanted to just quickly touch on transits. And listen, the transits, there's a lot to talk about here with them, but what I want you to take away from today is, right, the birth chart is a snapshot of where the planets were at your exact moment of birth. But how we learn about you and your patterns and different life happenings and what you're going to go through is by looking at how the planets currently in the sky right now, right, how they are impacting your birth chart. And so that's a lot. That's a lot there. But I want to share this because, again, if you are hearing any of us astrologers talk, we are saying things like, oh my God, you guys, Uranus just moved into Gemini. Like even today, right? We're talking about Mars and, you know, and the Pluto and the square tension that's happening. And so we say those things. And again, we're learning information collectively, what that means, but to make it come back to you, right? And how you can utilize this, you can look at where those planets are and what area of life they are showing up in by looking at your birth chart. And so I wanted to give this example with Jupiter, because Jupiter is one of our benefic planets. It is the great benefic. The visual I want to give you guys is Jupiter is the cheerleader with the pom-poms. Jupiter is like, I want you to have all of the growth and expansion. I want you to understand what you believe. I want you to find purpose. I want you to have the kind of abundance that you desire, right? Jupiter is like, yes, let's grow. Let's get big. The only caveat here, because Jupiter is wonderful in many ways, but we also want to be careful with excess. With Jupiter, it doesn't have as much of a understanding of like when too much is like too much. But I want to share this as a takeaway for you guys, because Jupiter in the sky will be moving into Leo here at the end of June. And it's going to be in Leo for almost a year through the end of July of 2027. It hasn't done this it hasn't been in Leo in 12 years. So, you know, we're always looking forward to having Jupiter pop in and learning what, you know, it's going to be doing for us. And so Cancer risings, Jupiter, and actually, okay, so this, what looks like a number 4 here and is gray, this is sort of representing Jupiter. This is its symbol. But this is what it would look like in a birth chart. If you added the transits, it would be, well, it depends how you pull your chart, but for most systems, this would be the kind of the first way that you might see it. The planets in the sky would be on the outer part of the birth chart. And so, again, Jupiter is going to be activating, growing an area of life for you. Cancer risings, because I use this as an example. Jupiter is going to be in your 2nd house of resources. So this would be a really good time to connect in with your core values. Do they still, like, are you in alignment? Do they still land the way that they need to? This is also the place though too, where we talk about like the external resources, the monies, the earned incomes, are resources that we have to live a life of stability and comfort. And so for my Cancer rising clients, and granted, right, there's a lot more that I'm going to look at before just giving, any whatever knowledge or like any insight, right? But this would be a time where if there are opportunities for you to have more of the monies, I'd be like, this is a nice time to do that. So if a job opportunity came, your way and you were excited about it, but we're like, I don't know if I can do it. I might be like, well, is it going to bring you more resources? And if you say yes, I'm going to be like, well, okay. And if it feels good, then like, this is the time. This is not a time to sit back. This is a time to work with your energy and allow Jupiter to bless you in that way and bring some opportunity and some abundance. So I realize, and again, there's a lot that we do with transits that is so nuanced and so much. So, but, right? A lot of us have been talking about Uranus and Gemini. Find Gemini in your chart. What area of life does that rule? Where might things be awakening? Where might there be some disruption, some excitement, some sudden unexpected things? Maybe there's some change that's being excited in that or incited in that area of life. And granted, Uranus is a slower moving transit. So this would be most potent if you have like personal planets or things there. And again, I didn't want to get that into the weeds, but I did. So forgive me. But these are the takeaways. These are the things that I would love for all of you guys to have with understanding more about your birth chart. So that wraps my yapping. And oh my God, to not have anyone say anything for that long was crazy. So thank you. I cannot say it enough. Like, I really appreciate all of you being here, for all of you that stayed the full time. My gosh. Because again, like this information is so much, it's super cerebral. It's super head heavy, right? But I really hope you're able to take something away today. So Michelle, are you there? Should we open?
Hello. Yes, that was so incredible. That was what a breakdown, honestly. And I just love like getting into the big three like that. So that was so helpful. Please put in your questions into the chat for Ashley. I'm going to scroll through the chat right now and see if anything came in during the presentation. Okay, so Lydia wants to know, what does it mean when you have the same sun and rising sign? How does that affect personalities?
What I would say is this then is going to mean that energy of the rising sign, of the sun sign, is extra big and bright. This is going to mean too that you and your being, you very much need to be seen. There is something about your energy that people might be like, oh, okay, there, we can be a leader here. It's going to mean that this energy through and through, right? If I gave the example of the sun sign being this, like, this is who we're learning to become. No, like, this is you know who you are through and through. And I'm going to be like, okay, and how can you be more seen, And of course, that's where we start to see some of the nuance. I have a client who's a Libra rising who also has a Libra sun and moon. And for other reasons too, but they're an influencer and they share their aesthetic, but they are seen. They are visibly seen. And so that's what I might say to someone with sun in the first house, hanging out with the rising sign.
Okay. And then thank you for that. Okay. So Moth Dust, first of all, great name. Would like to know, so if I just on the piece of like the transits of the Sag full moon that's coming up. So they said, if I look at my chart for this Sagittarius moon, I would just need to see what house Sag is in my chart, question mark?
Exactly. Yes, precisely. So you would just pull your chart, you'd find Sagittarius, you'd go, okay, this is the 4th house of family. Okay, my family, my roots, my traditions, my home. That's where I would do some of that releasing from. And granted, listen, it's a full moon. So whatever is coming up, work with it. But to work with your energy intentionally, that's where I would be like, okay, this is, let's make sure you have an extra focus here on 4th house things that need to be reflected upon.
Amazing. And then Tegan would like to know, this might be a little advanced, but what is the difference between a chart ruler and one's dominant planet?
Ooh, oh my God, I might need to, Michelle, I might need to freshen up. I'm not sure if I can give.
No, I don't. I mean, the dominant planet thing, I think that a dominant planet, I mean, I don't think that's like really a term, like a specific, that's not like a classic astrology term. I actually feel like when people say dominant planet, they probably are talking about the chart ruler, right, Ashley?
Okay, so thank you. That was my first too, but I thought maybe it's something else. And I tell you what, I will look it up.
Yeah, I feel like chart ruler is that's based on the ascendant. And then I guess the only other way I would think of like dominant planet is like, for example, I have 6 planets in Capricorn. So that's like a lot of Capricorn in my chart. And the ruling planet of Capricorn is Saturn. So I can say, okay, like I'm a Saturnian person, like Saturn's dominant presence in my chart, but that's not my ruling planet. So I guess that's kind of the difference. And that's why people would kind of use that, right? To Ashley, to your point, that's not like a specific astrology term.
Okay.
Okay. So Sarah would like to know, the moon is my chart ruler in Libra in the 4th house. Okay. Does this mean peace and harmony are required at home?
It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to, but and again, right, there's a lot of nuance here. And so I don't, but I would say that it is going to be important for you if you don't come from a family like that. And if you did, wonderful. If you don't, then you finding home, and whether that be your physical home and making sure that that feels like really comfy and cozy, finding your people that feel like home, it's going to mean that like your relationships, right? I really look at the moon with relationships too. It's going to mean that we're going to like really desire that kind of balance that we need, and so that being a priority, right? Like that, if our home isn't feeling good, if we had a hard childhood and we're carrying narratives from childhood that are holding us back from doing the things that we desire, that, right? Like that's where it can be hard and tricky. So you're going to always be looking to help that Libra 4th house moon feel supported.
I love that. Okay, so Tegan would also like to know, I noticed that conjunctions weren't red or blue, but rather displayed as white. Why is that?
Great question. I like to think they're kind of neutral because I think they can go either way. Because sometimes, right, like this can be when 2 planets collide together, they're really creating like a super planet. And sometimes that's lovely and wonderful. And for other planets that might connect with each other, that might be harder for one of the planets, especially if it's like an inner planet like the sun. And then we have Neptune right next to it. That creates a totally different planet. And so from my perspective, I like them as neutral. I don't know, Michelle, do you have a different take on that?
No, I totally agree with that. Yeah, they're kind of, it's just like more concentrated energy, right? Yes. And it totally depends on the planet on how it affects, like with the conjunction. So I also think like, because they're conjunct, like there's just no line. So like literally just from like a software perspective, right? Like where would you even put a line?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Serena, I think I said that right, would like to know, I'm mostly familiar with the whole sign house system, but I also want to flirt with Placidus for my own chart. Do you have any recommendations on how to start?
I hate to shoot this to you again, Michelle, but correct me if I'm wrong, but you work with Placidus, right?
I do. I do. I mean,
Tell us all the things.
no, I mean, I think, if you already work with whole sign, I think like in your astrology software that you use, switch it to Placidus. See what it looks like. Just look at that. It'll look a little wonky at first, just because like if you're used to whole sign's so symmetrical, and then all of a sudden Placidus will look a little bit crazy. Actually, okay, a tip that I do have is making sure that when you're using Placidus, I have this setting on Astro Gold, but I'm sure many other softwares use it, where you can actually make the houses look proportional. So you can check off this checkbox that says proportional houses. And I think AstroSeek does a good job at this if you want to use AstroSeek. And actually, we at our Lora birth chart, we're updating it so it will have proportional houses. So I'm really excited about that, because as a Placidus astrologer, sometimes if you're born really, really like high latitude or really, really low latitude, the chart can look really crazy. Like houses can be really small or really big, and that can be hard for like on the eyes. So just pulling the chart in a way where it's proportional houses, like in the way that it's displayed, I think is really helpful when you're getting started with Placidus. Cool. Okay. So, Shayla would like to know, how do stelliums affect the chart? And then they mentioned, especially when it's Leo and 5 planets, Sun, Moon, and 3 others.
Yeah. The way that I work with stelliums, and everyone is a little different, I really like there to be 3 inner planets, maybe 2 inner planets, like at the very minimum. Because again, if we've got these big planets and, the generational planets like Neptune or Pluto or Uranus, those guys, a lot of us are going to have them all in the same zodiac sign. And so from my perspective, when we get a stellium, it's just we really, a big part of our personality then, right? It lives with these planets. This particular area of life is being super activated. And I'll give you an example. I like this one. I have a client who has a lot of planets in the second house. And so if you look at the second house, you're like, wow, she's got all these, amazing planets, and she's going to have all of this money. And not necessarily. In many ways, she is very well resourced. But because of the connections that those planets are making, it has been a challenge. But that focus on her and the kind of comfort and stability that she desires, that is a big part of what keeps coming up for her throughout different phases of her life. And just like learning how to manage money has continued to be a challenge. And so anyways, that's just an example that that area of life is a focus, and it varies how it sort of plays out.
Ashley, that is so real. Like, I can't agree more on that, because people think like, oh no, like my 7th house of relationships is empty. Like, I'm never going to find love. It's like, actually, maybe like if you had so many planets in the 7th house, relationships are like such a big issue for you that you always keep coming back to, and it's never right. And it's a big lesson that you're learning. Sometimes an empty 7th house, kind of nice.
Listen, I would take an empty second house any day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Mock Dust would like to know, can you explain the 8th house? I get people have so many different opinions on it. And yeah, I think that's a good one.
I love the 8th. Oh my God. And I know what you mean. There's a lot to say here. I like to explain the 8th as this is the area of life where we like to sweep everything under the rug. This is where a lot of the harder things in life need to be addressed. In traditional astrology, we use words like, this is where we talk about shared resources, other people's resources. This is where we talk about things that are more taboo, like death, sex, and taxes and things that people are just like, oh, right. We don't share our not everyone. And hopefully we're changing this, but right. Like for a long time, people didn't share what they made, their salaries. So this is a place where all things that are sort of sticky, icky live. This is where the trauma and the grief and the loss goes, and we sweep it under the rug. This is where we hide things. This is where we keep secrets. This is a place where we really are going to need to deal with whatever's under the rug. So at some point, based on, right, all different things, we're going to need to grab the shovel and to lift up that rug where we swept all those things under, and we're going to need to lift it up, get the shovel, and, and where are the dead bodies buried? We need to bring them up and out, and we need to release some of what is down here. Because the 8th house, when we do that, that's where we see like the real sort of transformation. And that's when, especially in modern astrology, this is a place, of transformation at its best. But for an individual who has a lot of especially inner planets here or whatever, right? Your chart ruler here, there is going to be those kind of topics. There is going to be that sort of shadow that is part of your life that you're going to have to work through. The 4th, the 8th, and the 12th, those are like darker houses. And of course, we don't love that terminology, but and the 4th is sort of where we get some of the harder stuff. And then the 8th is where we put it until we have to deal with it. And then the 12th is where we sort of like finally realize, oh my gosh, we can like transcend from it and that whole experience. So anyway, I think the only thing that I didn't address in the 8th that I think is still important is just that, this is where we merge. This is where resources come together. So the 7th house is the house of partnership. And so if here we're coming into a contractual relationship, we're getting married, yay, everything's lovely. It's in the 8th where all of a sudden we're putting our monies together. We're thinking about stocks and 401ks or whatever your investment opportunities are. How do we merge our resources, have these shared resources where we gain resources that aren't tied to our earned income, like our day-to-day resources. And so I think that's another, anyways, I didn't mention that part, but I think that's important because that's also where I look at loans, credit card debt. Again, things where we're like, ooh, we're going to have to borrow. And if we borrow too much, it gets shameful. And then we want to sweep it under the rug. So sorry, that was so long, but the 8th is a lot. I love the 8th. My 8th house people.
I know. We love our 8th house people. Okay, let's see a couple more. So Riri is asking, some astrologers say the 4th house often represents the mother, but some say the mother is represented by the 10th house. Which houses best represent the parents?
I don't think there is a best. I guess I use the mother for the 4th and the father for the 10th, but I think there's so much more that I look at before I might utilize that, especially in a birth chart reading. But I think whatever feels best for you. I don't know. Michelle, do you have thoughts on that? That's
I mean, I actually agree with the confusion because there are some like old school astrologers who do say like the mother is the 10th and the father is the 4th. And that feels weird, right? Like, Ashley, I agree. I think more, the 4th is more of that kind of how you were parented and really comes down to the mother. But I actually think with parents, I don't think about it in terms of houses. I think about it more in terms of planets. So I feel like moon is more the mother and then like sun or Saturn is the father vibes, right?
Agreed.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. So not so much houses. I don't feel like houses represent your parents. So yeah, I would definitely look more to the house, the planets there. Okay, Riri also had an interesting like comment that I feel like is interesting because basically they said, Cap rising, Jupiter hasn't done anything in my 7th house. And I think it's just like an interesting question of like, okay, if in terms of transits, if you see something like Jupiter is transiting through a house, and you're expecting some kind of, things to happen there. Like, I don't know, what kind of advice do you have there if people feel like there's no, like, there's nothing kind of been happening there.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think all of the astrologers at the very beginning, when, you know, it was moving out of, right, Gemini into Cancer, we were like, oh my God, so excited, right? Because Jupiter thrives in Cancer. And so we were just so thrilled. And I feel like there was this big, like, wow, you know, you're going to find love, right? In your case or whatever. And here's the thing, right? This is where the nuance is. So, well, first off, Cancer had a lot, or excuse me, Jupiter and Cancer, it wasn't like a walk in the park by any means. But number two, right, it would depend also too, you know, I'd be curious about your natal moon. I would be curious about other things that were going on in your chart. And then if you came to me in a reading or something, I might also say too, if you are seeking partnership, if that is something that you desire, then too, I would look at your chart and be like, how do you like to put yourself out there? Are you working with the energy to make something happen? Because, and I don't, by all means, I don't want to sit here and be like, well, see, you weren't, you know, on the dating apps or going out or whatever, right? I don't know that. And that's not a fair thing to say. But I would be curious, right? If we, you know, if we really feel like we put ourselves out there in a way that, you know, feels good with our energy. So I hope that helps.
I love that. I love that. That is so, so true. Yes. Okay. Riri's giving hearts. We love it. Yay. Okay. I feel like in terms of, I want to make sure that the questions kind of apply to everyone. Okay. Janae said, does career fall in the 10th house?
You know, yes, for the most part. From like a traditional Hellenistic perspective, the midheaven, the MC, the angle that I did not talk about today, if that doesn't fall in your 10th house, I would find that. And that typically will be in the 9th or the 11th, sometimes the 8th and the 12th. But I would also weave that house and that energy in with how I look at the energy that we just need to embody with the career. And I always like to say with the 10th, like, this is really like the gifts that we have that we use to shine in the tribe. And because, and in modern astrology, we say that because, right, like for most of us, that's what we do 5 out of the 7 days of the week. If we have like a 9 to 5, that kind of a thing, like that's what we're known for. That's how we're sharing our gifts. So I just wanted to open it up. It is more than that too. But that's my take. And then, of course, I would look at the planets that rule the 10th and where the midheaven is. And then I'd look at the 6th and I'd look at the 2nd. And so many things.
So many things. Okay. Molly wants to know if you use Vertex or Chiron. And if so, can you speak on either of them?
You know, I do use Chiron. I do. I love my Chiron, the wounded healer. Chiron is a dwarf planet or an asteroid, right? Depending on who you talk to. But I do work with it, right? And again, I'm a traditional astrologer, but I work with it in a way that I really pay attention to what house, what area of life it falls in. That you, of course, you know, because of how Chiron moves, it's a lot of people around your age are going to have Chiron in the same place. But the area of life, I think, is really important. I do work with the Vertex sometimes, especially if a client has a particular question, especially if they've met someone and just like felt like, whoa, or just had an experience that felt very fated. I might work with the Vertex too, but I don't work with it on like a regular basis.
Amazing. Okay. And then this isn't really a question, but Danielle says, I love this. Will there be a second session? So Ashley, will you come back?
Oh my God, yes. I love Shable. And thank you guys. Cause this is, like I said, it's so much. So I really appreciate all of you and thank you. And I'm glad it landed.
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure. This is amazing. For those of you who are interested in working with Ashley, Alexa put in the chat a link to her booking page. Also, Ashley has it as the QR code on the screen. And then you can use that discount code that Alexa put in the chat and get your readings with Ashley because she is such a wealth of information. It's unreal. And to hear her, really break down your chart is just going to be the best. So Ashley, thank you so much again for being here. And we absolutely love you and just appreciate you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.